some of you may be familiar with the expression, he's a Hall of Famer, or he's in the Hall of Fame. And if you're not sure what that means, well, it just means that whether it's the baseball Hall of Fame, the basketball, the football, whatever, it just means that somebody is being recognized for excelling or being better than most. And that's it's an honor, truthfully, to be in the Hall of Fame. Maybe one of your players that you enjoyed watching is in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's a great honor. And Hebrews chapter 11 is lovingly referred to as the Hall of Faith. If you could say it that way, the Hall of Faith fame. And so any of these stories and any of these characters that are in the Bible are here forever. And it's a limited number by comparison, right? So if it's in the Bible, you want to pay attention to it because it's here for a reason by divine design. And of course, the Word of God is inspired, the Old and the New Testaments both. The Holy Spirit moved upon men. Holy men of old wrote as they were inspired to write. And I always remind myself that it's important. What's in the Bible is important because it's the ones that were selected by God himself to see to it that we have a record of it. And don't listen to the baloney out there where, well, there are other books that, you should be looking at. No, there's no other books other than the 66 that I'm going to look. I don't really need to go outside of that personally. That's just me. Doesn't mean there's not some value and merit to some of those things. But be very careful because then you might start questioning, well, why is my Bible excluding the apocryphal writings? Why does not my Bible have... It's a trap. Trust me, it's a trap. There's 66 books. Listen, and until we can get these 66 right, you don't need to be worrying about anything else, right? So you got 39 books in the Old Testament and 27 in the New. And an easy way to remember that, what's 3 times 9? 27. And then I'm sure that, all these little clever things are just there to help you remember. But I always remember number 39 was Larry Zonka's number of the Miami Dolphins. Now that's a running back, baby. I loved watching him play. No doubt about it. But the Hall of Faith fame, or the Hall of Faith here, chapter 11, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read through some of this here with you, and then we're going to jump into something. So it starts off and it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And someone said that means now faith, right now, present tense faith. I can go with that. That works, because faith is now. Faith is present tense, right? Now faith is the substance of the things that we're hoping for. It is the evidence of things not yet seen. Verse 2 says, for by it the elders obtained a good report. And then it gets into verse 3 where it says, through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. So in other words, God spoke everything into existence. You don't see words, do you? And in verse 4, it goes on, and now it's just chronologically going to go through, it's going to give you like a chronological record and a history, if you will, of your Bible. And it talks about, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained a witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. So then you get into Enoch. By faith Enoch was translated, that he should not see death. Did you know that Enoch didn't die physically? He was just taken right up into heaven. Bible says Enoch walked with God, and then he was not. God just took him. And he was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. What a great testimony. Something to have on your epitaph if you had a headstone. He doesn't, because he didn't die. Verse 6 goes on and it says, without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he that comes to God must believe, number one, that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. 2 things there. You have to believe that God is. He is God. He is the great I am. And he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. He's not a disappointer, he's a rewarder. Then now we're up to Noah. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, he moved with fear. He prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Now, would that then, the promise for Noah, the sign, the rainbow, the sign that God would not destroy the world by flood, would that not be considered maybe like a first of the covenants, first of 3 covenants? That he made with Noah, because Noah, don't forget, Noah set up an altar. And obviously, everything and everyone died except Noah, his family, and then 2 of every kind that God had him put in the ark. So, like starting all over again with this new covenant. And then verse 8, we go on to Abraham. When he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, he obeyed, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, and he was in a strange land, in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs of him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Well, there's the second covenant, now with Abraham. I'm going to make you a great nation, and by you all people are going to be blessed. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then he goes on into verse 11. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. These all died in faith. Watch this. You ready? Not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. I mean, can you imagine being in the Hall of Fame faith, the Hall of Faith fame, and you didn't actually realize the promise, but you saw it, and you contended for it, and you believed it, and you acted like? But did Abraham go and realize it? No, he wasn't able to. Moses couldn't even go into the promised land. In fact, that whole generation of Israelites didn't get into the promised land. I mean, this is why it intrigues me when I read about these people who are in the Hall of Faith fame, and it says they didn't receive the promise. They just saw them afar off, and they were persuaded of them. They embraced them and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on this earth. Verse 14, for they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. So wait a minute. So there's something better out there? Well, that's the idea. We are just strangers and pilgrims on this earth. This isn't home. This isn't it. And I don't know when the church is ever going to wake up to that, because the church, by and large, acts like this is it. No, this ain't it. This isn't it. We're heading somewhere that is it. And that's where it's not going to be corrupted or tainted. It's never going to end. There's never not going to be any sickness or sorrow or death or separation or suffering and getting old and age spots. You ain't going to have none of that. And so maybe it might help us a little bit if we start acting like we're just strangers and pilgrims on this earth. We're ambassadors. We are representing the king from his kingdom. He's going to establish that in what's known as the millennial reign. Obviously, all hell will break out on earth. You can see it's coming, right? You can see that we are heading toward a cataclysmic World War III event. It's happened. It's going to happen. And unfortunately, people are acting like, well, everything's going to be okay. Well, it ain't going to be okay. Iran and Turkey, they're on a mission. And Russia, by the way. But it's okay. It's okay, because the Prince of Peace is going to establish peace with us, and we're going to rule and reign for 1,000 years. Israel will wake up and say, holy smokes, it really is him. Yep. So there's coming a time, there's coming a day. So that should help us begin to realign our priorities in life. I want to be here as long as I can and be as healthy as I can. So therefore, I should try to take better care of my physical body, right? Take care of my emotional and mental well-being, take care of my physical well-being, and certainly never stop feeding my faith and growing spiritually, if you will, and in my knowledge of who I am. Verse 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, he offered up Isaac. Isaac, the one through whom the promise was going to come. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. Now, you understand that Abraham's first son was not Isaac. You guys know that. It was Ishmael. So, he was blessed too. There was a promise for him as well. But the Bible also speaks that, man, you ain't going to get along with nobody. Hello. That's that other faction on the earth that isn't getting along with anybody. Those countries over there, those radicals, death to America, those people, they came out of Ishmael. Sorry. So Isaac was actually the second son. That's the one through whom the promise comes. Of verse 18, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Accounting, verse 19, that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. So Abraham was getting ready to sacrifice his son Isaac. It just blows my mind when I think about how far would you go in your obedience? Well, I would never do that. I would never do some of these other things. Verse 20, by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, he blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning upon the top of his staff. Verse 22, by faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. Okay, we're going to stop there. Now, if you just are acquainted with Joseph by reading this, then you don't know the story of Joseph. By faith Joseph, when he died, he made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. Joseph was buried in Egypt. And he said, but you guys ain't going to leave me here. You're going to take me back. When God brings you back to the promised land, to Canaan, you're going to take my bones. So after 400 years, because the Israelites were enslaved to the Egyptians for 400 years. And then when God brought them out of Egypt back to the promised land, they took the bones of Joseph, right? How come? Because Joseph knew God's going to bring us back to where he promised we would be. He didn't see it. He died in Egypt. Now, you might be thinking, okay, what's that got to do with me? Well, I don't know. Something happened to me in these last 4 weeks. Go back to the end of the book of Genesis, if you would. Actually, just go to the book of Exodus for a minute. Second book of Moses called Exodus, page 59 in my Bible. This story of Joseph, you know, Joseph, you probably remember Joseph in the Technicolor coat, and, you know, there's been things about his coat of many colors and all that, but until you look at the story of Joseph, and I'll tell you what ended up happening, it drew me in because I thought, well, okay, so what was it? And I'm asking you to consider this for a minute. What was it, what prefaced or precipitated or what caused this change in Egypt that resulted in the enslavement of the Israelites? What event, what was it? And this is important. You have to pay attention and follow along. What was it that happened that caused this? And I just couldn't get enough because I'm like, I've got to dig into this because I know from years ago, my perspective and my viewpoints from years ago, I remember that, but we're talking about today. a new season, a new chapter in our lives. I'm not the same person I was when I went to Bible school. I was in my 20s. I'm in my 60s now. I'm a different person. And if I wasn't a different person, then something would be wrong. You learn, you grow, you change, you develop, hopefully for the better, right? Well, there was something. There's something I can pinpoint and say to you, something happened that is not so unlikely, and it's not so unlikely that this may happen in your own life. Something like this may happen in your own life to cause you to become enslaved. And you want to pay attention because before you know it, things change and you don't even know how or why it changed. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm not the same person I was. In fact, I'm worse than I was. I don't know how I fell this far. I don't know how I've gotten so bad in these areas. I'm happy to tell you that I'm pleased with the change that's been in my life. I'm happy with the change. It's always forward, it's always growing, it's always moving, it's always coming up higher. And it should be that way, so that even if I do fall, I'm falling forward. I'm falling forward because I'm making progress, I'm advancing. And so if I do fall, I say, okay, Lord, forgive me, I'm sorry that was wrong. And the Holy Spirit shows me, dude, you're wrong. Change your attitude, change your perspective. Okay. So Joseph, you know the story of Joseph, right? So the book of Exodus, let me just show you this. Let's just look at chapter 1, verse 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. Now, these are the 12 tribes. You know how significant the 12 tribes of Israel are, right? I mean, you know that Jesus came from the tribe, he's the lion of the tribe of what? Judah. So he descended from that lineage. That's where you get King David and so forth, right? Verse 6, Joseph died and all his brethren and all that generation. And the children of Israel, look at verse 7, were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Stop right there. What a great verse. Wow. But how did this happen? Well, you'll recall there was an incredible famine in both Egypt and you might as well just say the whole country. It was a severe famine that just nuts to think about how bad it was, which caused Jacob to say to his boys, listen, we got to find some food. I heard that there's food in Egypt. Go over there and buy us some food, because why should we die? Well, that makes sense, right? Now, this is the same family that sold Joseph into slavery years earlier. These are the same brothers that whipped up this plan to get rid of Joseph, because if you recall, Joseph was having dreams. Joseph had prophetic dreams, and he made the mistake at 17 years of age to share those dreams with his brothers. And the brothers got even more angry with him. Who the heck does this punk think he is? I don't know if they use the expression punk, but years ago we did. You little punk, you little snot-nosed kid. And so he made the mistake of sharing those dreams, and even with his father, and his father rebuked him. It's like, what are you talking about? We're going to bow down to you? Those were the dreams that he was having. And he made the mistake of doing that, and the brothers were already jealous of Joseph because they said, yeah, Dad likes you better, so you're going to get all the inheritance, and we're going to get nothing. So what did they whipped up this plan to kill him, but the oldest brother says, don't kill him. Throw him in a cistern instead. A hole in the ground that was to collect water. And just because Reuben had decided, well, I'll go back and rescue him and because Dad ain't going to handle this too well. Dad ain't going to handle the death of Joseph too well. And he didn't. So what ended up happening is the brothers threw him in the cistern. Reuben had to leave the area. And so ended up where they sold him to this caravan. So when Reuben came back, obviously Joseph is gone. And Joseph was taken into Egypt and eventually became the servant. He was bought by a high-ranking official called Potiphar. You guys know the story, I'm sure, right? And so that's how Joseph got into Egypt. And God was with him and blessed him. Amazing. Everything he did, you might as well say everything he touched turned to gold. And Potiphar's like, wow, dude, you're blessed. You are blessed. In fact, I'm going to put you in charge of my house. It only makes sense for you to be in charge of my household. I'm not even going to concern myself with anything, any of my affairs, except when I'm going to eat. I want breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And so Joseph is so blessed. Potiphar's house is so blessed. Things are going so well in Egypt, but there's a little problem called Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife is like, oh, I like this kid, but she had wrong motives in mind. And so she was making advances on Joseph, and relentless advances to get Joseph to do what you shouldn't do with another man's wife. Joseph said, nothing doing. I honor God first of all, and I honor my master. I ain't doing it. Well, she whipped up this nonsense where she accused him of trying to take advantage of her. Potiphar, as you can imagine, had him thrown into jail. So now Joseph goes into jail. Now, Joseph's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. And I'm looking at this story and I'm saying, wow, this is a very interesting story, because he gets into jail and then the jailer promotes him and puts him in charge of other inmates because he recognizes the blessing of God on him. I'm like, huh. No matter where this guy goes and whatever he does, man, everything just turns out right. It's blessed, it's prospered, and people are recognizing it. Well, in the process of time, the king's butler and the baker and the butler, cupbearer, they offended the king, Pharaoh, and they get thrown into prison, and they have dreams, and Joseph interprets these dreams. Now, remember, Joseph started off being a young dreamer, and he shared these prophetic dreams with his family, and this is why he's in the situation he's in now. Now he's in jail. And he's in jail for 13 years, by the way. That's a long time to be serving faithfully, to not dishonor God, to be a man of honor, to be someone that you can depend on and trust, and you're in jail for 13 years. I wonder after the first night if Joseph might have been tempted to think that, Lord, I'm serving you faithfully. How come I'm still sitting in jail? I wonder after the first year, and then maybe the second year, and then maybe the fifth and the seventh and the 10th, 13, 14, and all the way up to the 15th. I'm wondering what Joseph must have been like. I don't get this. I don't understand. But the scripture never tells us that he was questioning it and having a challenge with it. No, it just continually tells us over and over that he was blessed. He was a good man, and the people that he worked for were blessed, and people that entrusted things to him were blessed. And so finally what ends up happening is the dreams that he interpreted happened exactly. One gets beheaded, the other gets reinstated and promoted. And then Pharaoh finally has a dream himself, a troubling dream. And I don't know what these people were called back in the day, but the ones that would interpret dreams, they couldn't interpret the dream. And then I'm doing some reading on Old Testament history, and I find out that there is a manual for interpreting dreams. And there's actually a picture of a page where it's columns, where it shows you, if you have this dream, here's the interpretation. If you have that kind of a dream, here's the interpretation. But these people that interpret the dreams couldn't help Pharaoh, so Pharaoh's like, I need someone to interpret the dream. And the servant that got reinstated said, oh, I met a guy in jail. He interpreted my dream, and the other guy that you beheaded, his dream too, and it was accurate. So Pharaoh says, well, I got to see this guy. And it's so cool because they call for Joseph now out of jail to appear before the Pharaoh. And it said he had to change his garment and he had to shave. It's biblical to shave, men. I joke around with my wife. I said, I love that fresh shave feeling. It don't last long, but I love it, and it just feels right. Anyway, that's food for thought for later. So Joseph gives all the glory and the credit to God. It's God's the one who interprets dreams. And he tells the Pharaoh not only what his dream means, but he tells the Pharaoh, here's a plan for you, because God was letting the Pharaoh know, you're going to have a season of great abundance, but then it's going to be followed by a season, years of famine, drought, and it's going to be so bad. It's going to be super bad. And so Joseph not only rightly interprets the dream, he says, here's what you need to do. And the Pharaoh says, you're the dude, I'm putting you in charge. Not only are you going to be in charge of this, you're number two. You're in charge of everything. You're in charge of everything in Egypt except the throne that I sit on. So now you got two thrones in Egypt. Now, in the process of time, here's this famine, here's this drought, and that's why Jacob, who's named Israel, sends the brothers who threw Joseph in a cistern and who sold him into slavery to go get this grain and the food because we're going to die because it's so severe. And the Pharaoh gets wind of his brothers, his family coming, and says to Joseph, the Pharaoh, the king, says, you set your family up in the best of the best. Anything they need, anything within Egypt, it's yours. Take good care of them. Oh my God. That's how Jacob, that's how the other brothers ended up in Egypt. It was a good thing. It was a good thing. See, if you're not careful, you start thinking, Egypt is bad. No, Egypt saved their life. In fact, Joseph had said, if you just look at, let's see, go to Genesis, right there, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. He says to, verse 19, Joseph said to his brothers, fear not, for am I in the place, I'm not in the place of God. Verse 20 of Genesis 50, but as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. Verse 22, Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And it just goes on. Verse 24, Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land of Egypt unto the land which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Verse 25, Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from hence. That's what Hebrews references. So Joseph died being 110, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So here's why God did this, so that I could save a whole lot of people and see to it that the lineage would be preserved and not perish and die. Well, God caused all the famine and all the drought. You think so? You think God does all that? See, the problem with the Old Testament, a lot of times things were translated as, it would be translated as God did it instead of God permitted or allowed it. There's a difference between God doing something and allowing things to happen. He knows that we have a part to play in his great plan of redemption. And so there's a reason, now you know why the Israelites ended up in Egypt. It was a good thing. And they flourished because Exodus 1, it says, verse 7, the children of Israel were fruitful, increased abundantly, and multiplied. They waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. It was amazing. This was an amazing time for the Israelites. But watch what happens. And this is going to speak to you. You ready? Verse 8. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. That's verse 8. Stop right there. There's two things going on. I've sensed for a while that there's change coming, and not knowing exactly what it meant, and of course my mind wanted to place an interpretation on it, but there's change coming. And of course, we went into COVID. 2020 was a crazy year, right? And we had a nutty time of just nuttiness, and it's like, wow, that really changed everything. But there's something more than all that, and it just seemed like this is the season for something to shift and change for us. Nothing is going to shift and change if nothing shifts and changes. Bottom line. We can talk about change until we're blue in the face, but if something doesn't actually change, nothing's going to happen. And change is, not a destination any more than hope is a strategy. You can stay hopeful all you want, but what's your strategy? How are you going to get to where you want to go? We're going to stay hopeful. That's not a strategy. Yeah, you should stay hopeful, but tell me how you're going to get to your destination, which is what? Change. No, that's too vague. That's too broad. But I know something's happening. But watch this. That Pharaoh did not know Joseph. Verse 9, and watch this. He said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore, verse 11, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities. Verse 12, watch this. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Verse 13, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. In verse 14, they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. Oh my God, this thing flip-flopped. This went the other way. Sometimes I feel like we get to a place where we get mad with God when things flip-flop and change, and God has nothing to do with it. Well, God did this. Clearly, he didn't. God didn't do this. The other guy was done in office, so they got a new Pharaoh. I don't know who Joseph is, but these Israelites, they're a problem because they're blessed and they're prosperous and they're everywhere. I can't blame the Pharaoh, can you? He's looking out for his country. I don't blame him. I don't blame him one bit for what he did. Don't like it. I don't like the fact that God's people had to now go into bondage for 400 years. This is crazy. But now you know why it happened and how it happened. I wonder if there's something just waiting in your life. And if you're not careful, you might be tempted to get mad at God. And it's like, why? Why did you let this happen? Why am I going through this? We all have moments like that, don't we? And if you're not careful, you'll miss out on what God is going to do with you. Well, God, couldn't we bypass all of this? No. Because God does not violate human will. People get into positions, people have influence, and some people are naughty, and they do naughty things. And God will let it happen because He doesn't treat you like a robot. I don't want to be treated like a robot. That means that God has been patient with me for years because, like some of you perhaps, I ran from what I knew was the call of God. I always knew I was supposed to, something special with me in the church. I just didn't know what. But I'm too cool for that. Homie, too cool for that. I got some stuff. I got some living to do. Oh, okay. How did that work out for you? It didn't. It ruined my life. For a season, my life was destroyed. And how in the world I got here is a testimony to the grace, mercy, and love of God. I did my very best to destroy my life. And for a season, it worked. For a season, I thought God abandoned me, God forsook me, and I didn't know why I was going through what I was going through. And I thought, this is hard. I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can make it. Well, I did. only by the grace of God. And so here we are at this point in our history where something has changed and will continue to change. And what is that going to mean exactly? I really don't know, because how could they have known that they were about to enter into a season of 400 years of servitude, of slavery? But guess what comes next? After this, you're introduced to a little baby named Moses. Oh my God. God always has a plan. Listen, I'm sorry that this happened, but see, what God did was amazing. Underneath Joseph and that Pharaoh, it was amazing. But God already knew what was getting ready to happen, so I got a plan. His name is called Moses. Oh, took a while. It took a while. And as I read through the Old Testament now, I'm like, oh my God, I see this narrative. I see this story, how God's just weaving and working this plan out, but he's working with people. And people have always been the problem. Life would be great if it weren't for the people. Somebody said ministry would be wonderful and fun if it weren't for the people. Well, that's what the ministry's for, right? And so you have to just hang in there no matter what season you're at right now. You just have to know, listen, God's got a plan. He's working it out. And maybe you don't know what that next step is, but just hang in there because God will reveal it and disclose it to you. Moses comes next. I can't wait to keep talking to you about some of this stuff. Now, that doesn't mean I'm backing out of the New Testament. That's not what that means. It just means that, oh my God, this is exciting. This is like I'm sitting here watching the Netflix. I'm like, oh, what's coming next? Well, what's coming next is hardship. But watch, because Moses is going to come. And what does Moses do? He tries to talk himself out of doing it. He comes up with every excuse. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I'll close with this. I never wanted to do this. In fact, my wife, you ask her, she said, I ain't being married to a pastor. I'll never be married to a pastor. Be careful about saying never to God. This was not what I wanted to do. Now, what do you mean, Pastor, exactly? Well, number one, I never felt qualified. I never felt like I could do this job. But second of all, probably more important than anything is, I just wanted to be a good person in the church and serve and help. I loved being a part of the church. It wasn't always that way. But I just wanted to go and be with my brothers and sisters in the faith, and I wanted to be a part of things. I wanted to help, and I wanted to just, be a blessing. That's all I ever wanted to do. And so when I went to Rhema, one of the things that you could major in, of course, there was, ended up going to major in the pastoral ministry. I wanted to go, and they had it was called the Ministry of Helps, which is very broad and it covers an awful lot. That's what I'm going to do because I just want to be a good helper. I want to be a good servant, a good worker in the church, and go back to our local church and do that. That's all I ever wanted to do. So when it came time for me to select what I was going to major in, Val and I had it all set. Just put down helps. You're going to go into the helps ministry, right? So I went to school, made my selection, came home. She goes, well, how did it go? I said, well, I picked the pastoral ministry. She said, what? Why? I said, I don't know. I don't know why I did it. I just felt like I was supposed to. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? How many years later? Here we are. So you just don't know. You just got to start, be faithful, hang in there, everything will be okay. Now, anybody get anything out of this today? I'm enjoying it. I'm really impressed with some of these stories again. It's not like I wasn't impressed the first time I learned them, but I'm like, you know what? In these stories, they resonate with us. I can find myself in some of these stories and be like, there's been a time or two when I wondered if God was sleeping. There's been a time or two when I thought that he lost his collective mind up there in heaven.